Welcome to Scripture's 4 C's Insights. Insights into sacred Scripture. And for this series, insights into the mind and the heart of Pope John Paul II as he reflects on the teachings of Pope Paul VI on Humanae Vitae. We have with us once again Father John Hardon, our theological director, and really one of the most profound and spiritual theologians in the Church. The Holy Father talks about on page 69, he says about, people talk about continence being the cause of inner tensions from which men must free themselves. Now, that's really what the world is saying, that we owe it to ourselves, we have to have that release.
Well, I would distinguish between two kinds of tension. There is a tension which is frankly natural, normal, and healthy.
Right.
The tension, for example, of an athlete just before, say, he goes out on the field. The tension of a speaker before he faces a large audience. The great orator Cicero in the last century BC and the first century AD, he said that it's just as well that I've got my Roman toga on. People don't see when I face these huge audiences how my legs are shaking. So there's a tension which is normal, healthy. And to avoid that is frankly to be living in an unreal world.
Right.
But there was a tension which is the conflict between what a person should not be doing, the conflict, therefore, between the urges or temptations that a person faces and his effort to try to overcome, as long as a person is honestly trying to do God's will, seeing the practice of chastity. It's possible, no doubt, not only within marriage but outside of marriage, for those who want to practice chastity faithfully, that they may be unnecessarily, excessively under tension or in conflict. However, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is to suppose that the honest effort to practice chastity places such a demand on human nature that most people would become not only tense, but frankly could become neurotic and even psychotic. Don't you think so?
No.
Well, that's not true.
That's what the world is telling us, though, really.
Yes. In other words, there's nothing wrong with a person, in order to preserve his or her chastity, in exerting, again, him or herself, and in the process, as the expression goes, becoming tight or tensed up. It is not the practice of chastity or the effort made to practice self-control. It is the injudicious, the imprudent effort to control other appetites, and here the sex appetite, that would be wrong. But I repeat what I said before, a certain amount of legitimate sense of conflict is a challenge that is healthy.
Now, we actually receive a grace in state. For each state in life, God gives us the graces to handle the trials in that state in life.
That's right.
And particularly with we have the sacrament of matrimony to call on graces in this state in life as well, don't we, Father?
That provides the courage and the strength and the wisdom on how to cope with what you might put in quotation marks, the tensions
Right.
of married life.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that a large part of the unhealthy tension, the abnormal tension, is not in the practice of chastity.
Mm-hmm.
It is brought on by a society that is making chaste people feel they are abnormal.
Absolutely.
Don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly is. Because I think even with, as I said before, with Gwen, when we go shopping and or she likes to have me go with her because sometimes we have to load so much in the cart. You have to have 2 carts. Then people are waiting in line, and then they say how many are you feeding? You got a party, and you say 12 children, and people in the line are at a gasp. I mean, they're not admiring her. They think it's terrible. That anybody
See,
would
so the
pollute the
tension
world
really,
like that.
the tension is brought on by a society that is hostile
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
to chastity,
That's
whether
right.
in the single or the married state.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's tension, the kind that is wrong,
Right.
that I call unhealthy, abnormal. But we should not for that reason suppose that people who are trying to practice chastity, say in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Now you told me something that I think you should tell the people more about. Which child was it that,
Teresa, our 11th child.
number 11,
Right.
that was to be born around Christmas time?
Right.
And, there was danger, wasn't there, of
Right.
Gwen's?
They really, the doctor was so worried about the thinness of the uterus wall that he was telling Gwen that the slightest sign of labor, get to the hospital immediately because he anticipates the uterus to break, and you could bleed to death before we're able to, to stop it. And he was very, very concerned about it. And now I would say most women in that time would consider an abortion very, rapidly, because he was telling her very critically, as soon as you get the slightest pain, to the hospital.
And notice, and the tension, I would say, would be provoked by this doctor's advice.
Right. Well, that's right.
Alone, don't you think so? Left to
Sure.
herself? In fact, could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Well,
Jerry?
Gwen was concerned that if she did die, that the children would reject the baby, and she was preparing to die. So she wrote a letter to be open because she knew her due date was around, and she wanted to go full term with the baby. She knew her due date was around Christmas time. So she was anticipating that she'd be in a hospital or whatever it is, but she
Would
wanted
you read
this
a
letter
little bit
written.
from that letter, Jerry?
Yeah, this is a copy of it, Father, and maybe you could read it there. It's what Gwen wrote
How
at
much
Christmas
should we?
time. Oh, all the way down to the part where she gets done talking about Maureen. Because I think what she did, the purpose of the letter was to talk to each of our children and to try to impress on them that each one of them is unique and precious, and their life was precious.
And not
this
knowing whether she would survive Christmas Day, right?
That's right.
Suppose
So-
I do read. Tell me when to stop.
Okay.
Christmas morning, the happiest day of the year, a special time for loving and sharing with each other. We all know we have our first spiritual happiness in that the Christ child was born, so that we may have eternal happiness. The little babe was God's sign of his love for all of us. Then we know of the physical happiness, the joy of presence under the tree, the good things to eat, and all the merriment of being together. But this is a special Christmas this year, as we have our new little Coniker. I can remember the birth of each one of you, and how extra special each one was. A little babe to love and take care of. And so this is November the 11th.
Or number 11.
He,
Yeah, see, she didn't know if it was a boy or a girl.
Number
11.
this was number 11.
Mm-hmm.
He or she is special too.
Right.
A Merry Christmas to Maureen, my first baby, who fought to get out from birth and is still struggling to get out 15 years later. You became quite a cook in Portugal. Your love and kindness, your help has been greatly appreciated. To my dearest Kathy, Merry Christmas. I remember that cold, cold morning when you were born, and I bet that I was fatter than Santa Claus. How excited I was. Our little girl, number 2. I couldn't wait to bring you home to show little Maureen, 18 months old. You're a joy at birth and today, a joy in seeing you in 8th grade. To my cheerful Laurie, Merry Christmas. Everywhere Laurie is, there is sunshine and happiness. I love your smile, the cheer in your heart. Keep right on cheering all the days of your life. Shall I continue?
Yes, why don't you do that, because it really gets into each individual personality.
Merry Christmas, my dear Peggy. I couldn't believe it. Daughter number 4. The singing, swinging Coniker sisters. I was so happy I got my blue-eyed, blonde little girl. So cute. My sweet Sherry, Merry Christmas. I thought that 4 daughters was terrific. But when they told me, you have a nice new baby daughter, number 5, it was super. You were the superstar of the Coniker sisters. To my son, Michael John, Merry Christmas. Finally a son, a boy Coniker. How long we waited for you. Everyone was so happy. That special feeling that Dad had a son, nothing like a son. We had to tell the world that Michael John Coniker was born. To Happy Robert, wow, our second son. What a joy. Now 2 boys. Remember, Dad rushed me to the hospital at 1 in the morning after I had a root beer float.
Right.
Merry Christmas, Joe. But you had to wait a long time because you are
Number 8.
number 8.
8, right.
I'll never forget the beautiful and wonderful birth of our son Joseph in Portugal.
Right.
First going to 7 o'clock Mass in the morning, and then taking all the children home where Mrs. Hand took care of you and our dearest Maria Jose. We raced down the Marginal to Lisbon and right into the hospital particular, and in a matter of minutes, our little son, Jose, was born. Beautiful and perfect. Hi, Jimmy, Merry Christmas. Mommy has a new little baby for you. Will you take care of him?
We didn't know if it was him or her at the time, you know.
Sure you will. Be a good boy. Okay, Jimmy? Our 4th son, and just like our 4th daughter, blue eyes and blonde hair, and real cute. To my baby, Maria, Merry Christmas, I love you. You are my special angel. Well, you see, I made my Christmas wish for all of you, and I can't forget the one, and a very important one, my wonderful husband and your loving father. A very Merry Christmas, Mother.
And then their 11th child, the 11th child, Maria, Teresa Marie, was born on December 28th or 27th, healthy and happy. And thanks to God, our Heavenly Mother, when operation and healing went very well. And I think this was, we read this every Christmas, Father, at Christmas time for the children.
Well, I can tell you, I didn't want to interrupt my reading by putting my glasses on.
Right.
This is the first time in 25 years that I've dared to read in public such small print without glasses. And the Lord carried me through.
Very good. Well, I think this just shows you the preciousness of life. And here a mother that certainly would have succumbed to the advice of everybody else and not had the baby. And we can see how even when we had Joseph in Portugal, how God took care of Joseph, because we were worried about having a baby in Portugal, and particularly after we went to Portugal and we found out how bad the hospitals were. They were terrible. And the sanitary conditions there and everything were just unbelievably bad. And so after we got there and found out how bad it was, we really started to get worried about, having a baby there.
Well, I have no doubt, Jerry, that first of all, the marvelous providential protection that was given to Gwen, and, the happiness of rearing a family of 12 children,
Right.
that in God's plan from all eternity, He planned the Conikers.
Mm-hmm. That's right. All these children.
In order to be an inspiration and a witness to trust in God's providence.
It really is amazing, because, as I said, when we were living in Portugal, coming over as Americans, you're really quite soft and susceptible to so many things. And I think God knew that. And when Gwen had this baby, we found an English-speaking doctor, and a woman doctor. And we're very concerned because Gwen goes very fast. She normally doesn't tell me that she's in labor until it's almost too late, because with our first birth with Maureen in the hospital, it was a rough, very rough birth, and it was a hospital under construction. It was a very morbid environment, and she just doesn't like hospitals after that, so she always holds off on the hospitals until the last minute. So I was telling the doctor, now, when you get a call, come immediately, because Gwen will go into labor and deliver within 15 minutes after I hit the hospital. So she gave me a list of 17 phone numbers to call, a long list. And sure enough, Gwen tells me after Mass, so we rushed down and into Lisbon, into the hospital. It was about a 45-minute drive, going 70 miles an hour. And brought her up into the delivery floor, and naturally the Portuguese nurses there didn't speak English, and I was trying to impress on them the importance of calling the doctor. And I gave them the list, and there was a note on it the doctor wrote, so they read it and they started calling. They'd call 2 numbers and no answer, then they'd sit down and start laughing and chatting, and they put Gwen in the bed, but they weren't too concerned about it. And I was trying to impress on them, but I couldn't speak to them. They couldn't understand me. So I took the list from them, and I called one of the numbers in the center of the list, and I don't know why God told me to call that number. I was lucky to get an outside line in the first place, because when I got the switchboard, I couldn't even talk to the switchboard operator. I was that helpless. But anyway, I got an outside line. It was the doctor that answered the phone. So she came right over, and she burst into the hospital room, and at that moment, Gwen started giving birth to Joseph, and the doctor was trying to take off her sweater, and she got her arms caught in the sweater, and her hands were in back of her. Gwen's giving birth, and everybody's panicking, and the nurses put the gas mask on Gwen. They forgot to hook the tube into the gas tank, and so little Joseph was born right there, and the doctor still had her arms caught in her sweater, And it was a totally natural birth. Gwen recovered faster from that birth than any other child, and she had her green scapular in her hand, but all the way through, and just how God protected us.
And this is what I think myself, as we've been saying, Jerry, that our modern world has become so sophisticated scientifically,
right,
has achieved so many marvels in the material world, that the fact that it is God who is still running the world,
that's right,
for a lot of people has become almost a forgotten memory.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it's a matter, as we know, of bringing new human life into the world.
Absolutely.
What a marvelous gift.
Right.
What a treasure. And not just in this life, but for all eternity.
For all eternity, right.
To think that God would abandon us if we trust Him.
Mm-hmm. In such an important activity as human life.
Yes.
That's right.
There was a phrase, by the way, built into the mosaic of the St. Mary of Providence Mother House in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
of the Daughters of St. Mary of Providence. I've been going there for 30 years, and I often preach from the pulpit, and I'll see these 2 Latin words embossed in the mosaic. Dominus providebit. Mm-hmm. The Lord will provide.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
In other words, provided we trust Him, provided we do His will, And the secret, I'm sure we've said this before, the secret is first, what does God want me to do? That's why we're going over this.
Right.
God wants us to do what the church, through her vicars, is telling us He wants us to do. Provided we know what God wants us to do, then we decide to do that. Then we have to, the word, whatever verb you use, we have to abandon ourselves, let go, surrender, sacrifice our own wills, in fact our judgments too, because humanly speaking, for example, say in this case, humanly speaking,
it shouldn't.
How could anyone know what would happen? Only God.
Right.
But if we trust Him, He will always, and the word is He will always take care of us.
That's true. When, Mother Bernadette of the Handmaids of the Precious Blood, and you know her very well, and when she was dying a very painful death of cancer, I talked to her on the telephone, and she said, Jerry, whatever you do, don't give up. I know you're going through incredible trials now, and with money and everything else in the apostolate, but what you went through, what your family went through in Portugal, and how God took care of you over there under unbelievable circumstances, it was just giving you a sample of how He will take care of the whole apostolate. So I've always prayed for her at every Mass, and I remember her, and she's really as an inspiration to me. I know she's praying for
saintly
us.
soul, and again, great trust. Now, in her case, the Lord took her.
Right.
But no matter what the consequences are, because God, who knows the future, all He wants of us, is to do His will and trust Him.
Right.
And step number 3, He will always take care of.
That's right.
Jerry, I think too, as we are, rounding up this unusual, I should say, this is an unusual dialogue.
Right.
It seems to me that within the apostolate of family consecration, we ought to begin to foregather similar
case histories. That's true.
And this is Easter Monday. Do you mind if I give you a date?
Okay.
Today is the 8th of April.
Right.
By April the 8th, 1986, there will have been at least a slim paperback of mothers and fathers, ideally belonging to the apostolate, who in different ways, from different angles, have learned from experience how their trust in God's providence has never been misplaced.
It's a beautiful, because we could do it right with
Don't
the
you think
members.
so?
That would be very uplifting for people, because they need that testimony that it really can happen in today's world.
And there's nothing, I think, that you might say is more convincing than other people's conviction tried to the limit, as this was.
Right, that's right, it really was.
And I think, too, people who are, say, not in the married state, like myself, priests and religious, with their vow of celibacy. Though we can give you people the principle, in large measure, this is where you especially, I don't mean just you personally,
the people
or Gwen, but married people who have learned by living God's providence how the Lord always comes through, so that the principles you get from those who are the church's, let's say, official teachers, how the principles are matched with experience to convince an unbelieving world that the church's teaching is true, and the truth proved by facts, the facts being real life experiences such as this.
That's a beautiful note to end our program on, Father, because I As we talk to our members in the apostolate, we see that so many of them have lived this deeply committed, consecrated life, and how they never called it that before, but that's really what it was. They were living a committed, consecrated life, doing God's will to the nth degree, and how He brought them through these trials. And I feel that this is really one of the messages of this particular show, is to have that total and absolute confidence in God, that first C, to look to Him as our source and no one else, because God really will provide for us if we trust in Him and if we do His will. And one of the things we can be certain about is when we follow the Vicar of Christ, we're doing His will. There's no question about it. This is the beauty of the Catholic Church, the certainty of the Catholic Church. When the Pope speaks on something,
Oh, Jerry,
you know it's
keep
His will.
repeating that.
That's right. It really is. And I think this is the whole goal of the apostolate, is really to carry the teachings of the Holy Father out to the four corners of the world. And the beautiful part now, as we were telling Father before the show started, our teachings now are going back to India. And Bishop DeMello is utilizing our programs back in India now, and how it's made a complete circle with Mother Teresa coming here and now it going across the ocean again. So God is, again, all we're doing is saying what the Holy Father is saying, and He's another example of doing the impossible, and His whole life is to be studied and imitated. So we're now going to break and to pray and to pull together now and to set our goals and share with one another our own insights now on the Holy Father's lessons for the last 3 weeks. Be back in a few minutes. Thank you, and God bless.